Welcome back to STL Live. I'm Sarah Thompson, and today we're learning about Fantasy Maps, a new St. Louis Public Library exhibit. And we're joined by Executive Director Waller McGuire, and we now welcome Jen Ohzourk, Senior Subject Specialist at the Central Library. So thank you again for being here, and Jen, thanks for joining us. So we kind of focused on the first segment about this very cool, all the sort of creative that was designed with the exhibition, but I want to kind of get into some of the details of the exhibit itself and how what the literary component is. So maybe Jen, you want to start us off with that?
Sure. When the idea was brought to me, because I work in the adult fiction area, the first thing I did was just start pulling books out to see, does it have a map, does it not have a map, and then figuring out the categories that we could work from. And from there it just kind of naturally progressed. Mm-hmm. And so one of the other components of the exhibit is up on our third floor in the Carnegie Room, and there are several cases. They're divided down into categories. This is one of the maps. Okay. This is from Winnie the Pooh. This is the 100-Acre Wood. Okay. And this is on display in the classic children's case. Uh-huh. But we also have cases that relate to contemporary epic fantasy. There are an assortment of things, science fiction, mm-hmm. a case that's nothing but fan art. Mm-hmm. So really a lot of variety, showing just how kind of creative people can be with what they put with kind of the literary cartography mm-hmm. that goes with these stories.
Mm-hmm. And maps, when you think about it, I mean, obviously I'm going to say something pretty like The Lord of the Rings. It mm-hmm. really plays a vital role when you are reading in a lot of ways to understand the context, the geography of the setting of the work that you're reading. So did that play a role in which books you chose to put in the exhibit?
It did. J.R.R. Tolkien was trained in cartography. And so when he created his worlds, he actually did create his own maps. There is a case that's just expanded maps. So for example, the original Tolkien maps, and then when Peter Jackson did the film, there was somebody else that created these expanded maps. And so we have them side by side so you can see that. But yes, we looked at the list of books and then started choosing things where it was like, well, here's an example of this, and here's somebody's take on that. Alternate history. There's a couple of examples of that.
That's wonderful. And Waller, when we started off, you mentioned that the Central Library houses, did you say 3,000?
300,000
300,000.
300,000. It's a huge collection. It's fascinating.
Wow. So tell me more about that.
Well, it ties into this exhibit. We actually made a fantasy map of St. Louis. We thought that the one on the floor, the vast one, mm-hmm. was going to be the most exciting part. When I saw what Jen pulled together and the staff, that's really quite beautiful as well, and really quite fascinating. It's fun to go through the exhibit and watch people with their nose pressed against the glass.
Yeah.
But then it leads back into our own collections. So we have unusual maps of St. Louis as part of the exhibit. You wouldn't think of, for instance, maps of diseases in St. Louis as being something you'd see, but things like tourism maps and some of our very early historic maps of St. Louis are part of this exhibit. So we brought it all around to real maps as well, and sometimes it can be hard to tell the difference.
300,000. And how far did they date back then?
We have one of the very first maps made of the western United States in our collection. We have one of the earliest maps of St. Louis, 1812, in our collection, and they go well back into medieval maps, some of them. We also have the full satellite series of CIA maps. You can imagine what those are used for. So it's an enormous and really fascinating collection. It's amazing what you can learn from maps.
Yeah, and it's amazing what's literally just right here in St. Louis at the Central Library. I had no idea.
It's a challenge sometimes to choose, as Jen had to do, to choose between all the amazing things we can show. You have to make some tough choices sometimes.
Right, especially in covering all the genres, as you mentioned, from children's literature to, as you said, fantasy. And
exactly. And so we actually have displays in 2 locations with some of the books that are on display, but then others, because there were just so many that were really cool, but you can only put so many on displays.
Absolutely.
So
everybody wants to see their favorite.
Yes. Sure. Really interesting. I mean, the one thing, besides taking away that this is an incredible exhibit, 300,000 maps, that's my factoid, a new St. Louis factoid you have introduced to me today. So go check it out. It's taking place at Central Library. It's Fantasy Maps, Imagine World. It's a fascinating exhibit that really takes on and to a whole new level this theme of maps. It's running now through October 15th. And for more information, you can go to slpl.org. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you very much. much.
Well, we'll have more STL Live right after this. Please stay with us.